Hey y'all, welcome into a Saints Draft Day live chat. It's finally here. We've been talking about the NFL draft for a month and making picks that are inevitably going to be wrong. And now we are here on the first day of the draft, and we have a lot to talk about because, everyone keeps tweeting about the Saints trading up. And as we all know, the Saints love to trade. So here we are. My name is Jeff Nowak, NOLA.com's digital sports producer. I'm here with two of our Saints beat writers, Amy Just and Luke Johnson. How y'all doing today?
Good. Draft's a little later than I would like. I'd like it to start already, but primetime TV and all of that fun stuff. So
that's the best part, waiting around all day.
No, this is good. I went for a bike ride this morning. I'm gonna go hit the driving range. I'm like pretending like today's the weekend, and then I'm gonna be brought back into reality tonight. That's okay.
Right, and then the entire weekend, just boom. I do apologize in advance. They apparently decided, the powers that be decided today was the day to chop down all the trees in my neighborhood and run them through a wood chipper. So if you hear that, I apologize. I'll try to mute my line if it gets too loud, but we'll see how it goes. But first, I wanted to dive into really the only major, I don't know if you want to call it news per se, of the day, which is both Ian Rappaport and Jay Glazer have tweeted the Saints are actively looking at trading up into the top 10. There's been no official kind of reports of what team that might be, what any package might be, but that's out there in the world, and we have to deal with it. So I want to throw it to Amy, who put together kind of an expansive look back on the Saints draft day trades over the past, better part of the last 2 decades. And one thing that jumped out to me is I think if you average it out, they're looking at like 1.4 trades per draft, which is kind of remarkable. So I'll throw it to Amy here. Tell me, what kind of were your takeaways after looking at all that, and you see the reports today. What are you looking at?
Yeah, so even before the reports today and this week, I have said that it would not surprise me in the slightest if they traded up at any point. But I was mainly looking at the third round because they've got 2 compensatory picks right at the end of the third and no original third round pick. So I figured it would be there, and it could still be there, right? They could still trade up there and trade up in the first. It's what they do. They traded up 3 times last year to go get Zach Bond, Adam Troutman, and Tommy Stevens. Stevens no longer here. He's in Carolina now. But this is what they do. And when asked about it yesterday in media availability with us, Mickey Loomis said, I wouldn't say that volume is a priority for us. I think quality is a priority for us. And so that's a very Mickey Loomis way of saying the Magic 8 Ball says it's likely that we'll trade up. So I don't know if it'll be today. It very well could be based on what people are reporting. Though I don't know if you trade into the top 10 to go get a corner. Do you trade up into the top 10 to get a QB? I'm interested to see what the thinking is here.
Yeah, the team that jumped out to me is obviously the Broncos, who traded for Teddy Bridgewater yesterday. They're sitting at 9. Maybe suddenly they're saying, oh, we don't need a quarterback anymore. Let's look at trading back. I don't know. But, first I did want to go through the picks that they do have. So in the first, they have the 28.
Can we pause here for a second, Jeff?
Yeah, go ahead.
Like literally as we're talking, the Saints just tweeted eyeball emojis. So,
God.
And that's it. They're fueling the fire here. They're fueling the fire. This is. I made a mistake by talking about going to the driving range and having a nice easy day before the draft starts in earnest tonight. They're going to keep me working all day. That's okay. We got cool, fun jobs, but come on, guys.
It's like, why do you do this to us? But yeah, so at present, this might have changed by the time I get through the list. But at present, the Saints are sitting with, probably the biggest draft haul they've had in years, which is the 28th pick in the first round, the same pick in the second round, then the 2 comp picks at the end of the third, which is 35 and 42 in that round, the 28th pick in the fourth round, no pick in the fifth, the 34th pick in the sixth round, another comp, and then no, that's not right. Hold on. number 229 overall in the 7th, and number 255 overall in the 7th. So those are a lot of picks. And you had Mickey Loomis sitting up there yesterday saying, okay, I don't think we have a lot of roster holes, despite what people, might look at and say, okay, cornerback, wide receiver, edge rusher, play like positions where they have lost players.
Linebacker.
Yes, linebacker. He was up there and said, I don't envision a lot of scenarios where a rookie's going to come in here and displace the veteran players. And I think what you read into that is, yes, they are more than interested in packaging some of these picks to go get a guy they want. And that's what they've done the last few years. What's your read on that, Luke?
Yeah, I mean, it felt like a fruitless exercise every time we were doing one of these mock drafts, talking about like all the picks the Saints have and picking at number 28. It's like the odds of that happening, just like as the draft moved closer and closer and closer, just felt less and less and less likely. I mean, they may not have like a lot of needs in Mickey's eyes, but they do have some, right? And corner is a glaring one. And I think the more and more we talk about these prospects going into the draft, I think the less and less likely it feels that one of the better corners in this draft are going to make it to number 28. It almost feels like a necessity if you have that one glaring hole in your roster that you really need to fix, or if there's one player that you really, really like to make a move. And Amy and I were talking about this in the lead up to the draft. It's like when you're Mickey Loomis and the Saints, it's like you're fighting your nature. It's like you are the person who consistently has always been the person who's trading up in the draft. That is who you are. You are an aggressive person. And while we can all sit here and say, well, they lost starters at basically every position except for the offensive line and safety, and they have holes to fill, like, we sit here and think they could really use those 8 picks, and we see a lot of analysis where it's just like, hey, the better drafting teams are the ones who give them more chances to hit on guys, and the Saints' best draft was the one where they had all these picks in the top 100 picks, yada, 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 but it's not who the Saints are. The Saints had their approach is always about identifying not only like the good players, but the players with the right stuff to fit in what they've built. And that means they go up and get guys. They go up and get somebody like Alvin Kamara. And yeah, I just would have a very hard time believing, even if all this stuff wasn't coming out about the Saints trying to move up and be aggressive, I just have a very hard time believing that they would stay pat and stay put and use these 8 picks that they have in their possession to add 8 players to their roster.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point. And that's kind of when we did all these mock drafts, we did 3 mock drafts with the group. And then Luke did a 7-round mock draft a few days ago that's on our site. You should go check it out. And that was always kind of my calculus in when you're picking at 28, the need at corner is not going to force the Saints to do anything. They're not going to say, okay, we desperately need a corner, so we're just going to draft whichever one is there. They are going to draft the best player available, and if there's a corner they want, they're going to try to go get them. And that's a lot of what Mickey said today when kind of asked about that. We have a question here from Gigates. I don't know. Gigates?
Maybe.
Yeah. Maybe it's GI Gates. Either way. So, Amy, you went through a lot of these trades yesterday, and from my recollection, they haven't actually traded into the top 10. The closest, I think, was Davenport when they traded up to 14. And so when you're looking at draft day trades, you kind of have to look at the historical trades and kind of figure out, what's the value there. For reference, they gave up in that trade to move up to 14 with and swap with the Packers. They gave up 27, which is close to what they have today. They gave up number 147, and then they gave up their 2019 first rounder, which I believe the Packers used on Jordan Love.
In 2008, they traded up from 10 to 7. But that one was a little different because it was a couple of packages. Yeah, I would envision something like the Marcus Davenport trade. It just going from 28 to 10 is a huge difference. I know that's like, yeah, no duh, but I just trading away another first rounder next year, I don't know how much that makes sense. Obviously, I'm a reporter and I'm not Mickey Loomis, but they don't have a quarterback under contract for next year, which concerns me. If they trading away their next year's first rounder would, I don't know. We'll see what happens, but yeah, it's gonna be costly. Whether they include a player in this package, obviously it'll be a couple draft picks, but yeah, it's not going to be a cheap package to move up that far.
Right. And you saw the Ravens trade Ben to the first round, and they traded away a player to do it. And I think a lot of times you look at this and you say, okay, it's going to be picks. How do the picks match up? Sometimes it's not a pick. It's the players that get moved. So I think that's an interesting point.
So I think if you look at you can look at the Jimmy Johnson trade chart, which I think is a pretty accurate reflection of how teams value picks. Like the Saints, even if the Saints package their first and second round pick to try to move up to number 10, those are not equal value, picks in a trade. So you're probably looking at having to package next year's first round pick. And like Amy said, I mean, if the Saints were 2 years ago, dogs are saying hi.
Is he reporting a trade?
Yeah, maybe.
Trade sniffing dog.
Hey. This is live broadcast stuff. Let's go see what's going on with Oscar here. All right, is there a bus? All right, cool. Say hi. Say hi. Okay. All right. So, hey.
No, he's frozen. We just hear the dog.
3 years ago, they traded for Marcus Davenport, and they had a very good football team there and in place, and the team that they thought was going to compete for a Super Bowl. You could be like, okay, we're going to trade next year's one because we think that's going to be at the very back end of the first round. It's not going to have as much value, and it ended up being right. I think it was a number 30 overall pick. I mean, that might not be the same case this year. Nobody knows if this is all gonna work with Jameis Winston or Taysom Hill under center. And maybe they're trading away a top 10 pick. They don't really know. And I think you could also look at, historically, one of the bigger, bolder trades when a team moved from the back end of the first round up into the top 10. Back when the Falcons drafted Julio Jones, they traded all the way up to number 6 overall, and they gave up 5 picks, first, second, and fourth rounder in that year, plus his first and fourth rounder for the next year. I mean, that's I think when you're moving that far up in the draft, I think that's the kind of value you're looking to get in return, and that's for the uncertainty of this coming year with the Saints. I think that's a lot, and you better really, really like the guy and know he's going to be a cornerstone piece of your franchise.
Right. I think what I've seen a lot of people point out today, and I think I agree with most to a certain extent, is you don't make that trade, you don't make that huge of a move unless it's going for a quarterback. You would have to really like a guy, say J.C. Horn, Patrick Surtain, really like a guy to go up that far to get him to invest that much in him. And it puts a lot of pressure on that player too. I don't know if I can think of another example beyond Julio Jones where someone moved up into the top 10 to specifically get, a skill player or defensive back. I'm sure they exist, but they are uncommon. You see that more for, maybe offensive linemen, real stud offensive linemen. But yeah, it'll be interesting. And, if the Saints did move up into the top 10, who would be, if you had to guess, Mr. 7-round mock draft GM, who would the target be if that was your pick?
As much as I really like the idea of seeing Jamar Chase run around in a number 1 Saints uniform, you know, I would have to think when like you're saying, if you're making that move that far up, you're thinking one of these 5 quarterbacks it's expected to go in the first round. And if it were me, and we hear some of the speculation about a certain player who's maybe on the kind of outside looking in among that group of players. Yeah, I really like Justin Fields. I think if you're going to be aggressive and move up into the top 10, and you're going to get a player to be a cornerstone for your franchise, and you're feeling comfortable giving up all those picks, go get a player like that. Go get a player who could end up being the face of your franchise for the next 15 years. I'd be good with that. But if they end up trading away 4 or 5 picks this year and next, including a first rounder, and they pick somebody like Patrick Surtain or J.C. Horn or especially somebody like Caleb Farley, who I really like. He's one of my favorite players in the draft, but they doing all that for a player who's got some medical questions. I don't know if that's like the difference in value between a player like that and somebody you could get in potentially the 3rd round. Was we saw Algerius Sneed was a great player for the Chiefs last year, and he was a mid-round pick. I don't know what the if the value for that matches.
Yeah, it is important to note that the Saints love them some Ohio State players. So
this is true.
We'll see.
This is empirically proven. Okay, so let's stop talking about trades that do not exist at this point and start kind of looking at what we do know, which is, we talked to Mickey Loomis yesterday, and one of the things that got brought up was opt-outs and how opt-outs might be affecting values on players. He indicated that it would not, at least at the base level. It's obviously a factor in terms of the amount of tape you have on guys, but it's not going to be a reason you're lower on a guy. It might be, if you have 2 guys with the exact same grade, and you have more tape on a guy, that might help put him above. But to me, it didn't sound like they were looking at opt-outs and not seeing a guy play last year as, a baseline for anything. Amy, you wrote a story about this today. What was kind of your takeaway there?
Yeah, nobody seemed concerned about the opt-outs themselves, just because this was such a weird year. Like, the Saints love small school guys, right? And a lot of them, their conference is canceled, or they shifted to the spring, or they only played 2 games. And then some of your bigger conferences, as Sean Payton pointed out last week, some guys opted out while the Big Ten had said that they were not going to play football. And then they ultimately did. And it's just messy. And then you add on COVID canceled some games, and the combine got canceled, and all of this stuff. The players didn't really have a whole lot of control over last year, and it doesn't sound like any NFL teams are penalizing them for that. Now, Sean Payton wants them to be in shape, and he said that. It's we're not so much as paying attention to the opt-outs as, are they in shape right now? Do they look good? Are they testing well? And that's what they're paying attention to. Obviously, if you haven't played football in, a full year, that, it's going to change some things as far as things that you can't replicate, right? You can't replicate those reps if you're not, actually playing. But yeah, everybody knows that it's been weird, and they're just dealing with it. You can't make up information that you don't have, as Mickey Loomis said last year and reinforced again yesterday. So it's just going to be a weird thing where it's even more of a gamble this time around, like it kind of was last year.
Yeah, for me, I think when I look at it, it's not going to affect the day one guys. Jamar Chase is, projected to be a top 5 pick. If he goes to the Bengals, he'd be number 5. The LSU has put a ton of incredibly talented wide receivers in the NFL. They have never had a top 10 pick at the wide receiver position. And a guy who didn't even play last year is going to be that guy, assuming he doesn't drop down the draft boards, because people are actually more concerned than they're letting on. So I don't think it's those guys. You're going to see a bunch of opt-outs go in the first round. To me, when you look at the later round guys, that's where whether you're concerned about a guy or not, I think it impacts your ability to pull a Teron Armstead in the third round, because you just don't have the tape of these smaller school guys that you want to have, if they didn't play last year. You're going to have a harder time finding the diamonds in the rough than you would have previously. At least that's kind of where I see the opt-outs factoring in. It might not be a team actively dropping someone down their board, but they might not have become aware of a player that they would have otherwise had they played. And I think when you look at a team with a lot of later round picks that is willing to trade, I think that's a good incentive to try to make sure you get the guys who you are targeting. And that's what they did last year with Vaughn and Troutman in the third round. Let's see. So speaking of those later round picks, the dog has some more input. I did want to talk about your full 7-round mock, Luke, because you kind of went into those later picks, and I'm curious how you feel about those picks, day 2, day 3, as we kind of go into this. He's still fucking.
He's picking a terrible time to just like fire up Bark Machine over here. I think Chelsea's coming down. She's going to handle this. So, okay. So, I mean, I think there's a lot of stuff to really like in these later rounds. Specifically, when you're looking at that kind of third round area, I think there are a lot of guys who I think could be available there that could be interior defensive line spot where you saw a lot of their depth kind of sliced off this year. Guys like Malcolm Brown and Sheldon Rankins played a significant amount of football for him, played really, really big reps, and they're not here. I think there's going to be a handful of guys who could be available in that 98-105 range who could play really, really important football next to a very good player in David Onyemata, and they could bring him along slowly with Shai Tuttle and Malcolm Roach getting reps there too. So that's kind of one area where I feel pretty confident they can find a player if that's where they kind of choose to address that. And then in the later rounds, this is a really, really deep wide receiver class, and I think that they're going to continue being deep wide receiver classes. But when you look at some of the players that they've met with in the scouting process, a lot of them are some of these wide receivers who you expect to go off the board in the 4th, 5th, 6th round, who are just kind of, they weren't hugely productive guys, but all of them have just home run ability. And I think that's an element that we haven't seen in the Saints offense for a minute. And I think it's one that they want to bring back. And I think there's just a number of guys who are going to be available in those mid rounds. In my mock draft, I picked Anthony Schwartz from Auburn, I think in the 4th. Who's a guy, he never had more than, I think, 50 catches in a season. He never had more than like 600 yards in a season, but he runs a 4.25 40. And you plug that into the Saints offense with a quarterback who can throw the ball downfield a little bit better than Drew could last year. I think there's stuff in these mid and late rounds that can really, you can identify that one trait and use it and max it out in the offense, kind of like they did with Robert Meacham back in the day, where they're like, you can't do everything really well, but you can do one thing super, super, super well, and we're gonna make you a really good football player.
Anything, Amy? Anything to add? Or we could just go to the dog and see what he thinks.
Yeah, Oscar has thoughts.
Yeah, I wanna hear what Oscar has to say. Clearly would know more than me.
There's something along the lines of woof, woof. The funny thing is, before we came on, both me and Amy were like, oh no, there's a lot of noise going on outside. They were doing work on trees and
Construction next door.
Going in that it was going to be Oscar that threw us the biggest wrench. Well, okay, one thing we can do before we go is, so obviously we did all these mock drafts. We should talk about them. A popular pick was Greg Newsome, who is a very highly touted cornerback from Northwestern. We kind of, vacillated on some of these picks as we went through. And then we got to the third one. Greg Newsome fell down the board. And everyone kind of unanimously agreed in that situation. No Zaven Collins in that simulation. No Caleb Farley. No Kwity Paye, who was a pick of mine from earlier. And it was a pretty easy choice. Does anyone want to go into why that was an easy choice in that situation? I think part of it speaks for itself. But.
Yeah, I mean, the Saints need a corner, and they need one who can plug in right away and be a day one reliable player. It feels like it was a million years ago that the Saints let Janoris Jenkins walk. But then also you have to deal with the fact that Marshawn Lattimore may be facing a suspension of some sort for his arrest and a fourth-degree felony charge from Cleveland that occurred about a month ago. That still has to go through the legal process, but it's not a great situation, especially when you have minimal depth there. It just makes a dire situation even more important for them to fill.
Yeah, I mean, they have 3 corners on their roster right now who have legitimate NFL experience. And 2 of them are guys that you don't really want to count on to play 17 games at outside corner. I think you can feel confident in them to fill in for a game or 2 or 3. But Patrick Robinson's 34 years old, and he's played like 20 games the last 3 seasons. PJ Williams values in his versatility, being able to play in the slot, safety, outside if you need him. But they need an outside corner who is going to be an impact player and can play press man coverage against some really, really, really good receivers in the NFC South. I mean, it's like a critical need for them right now. And they don't have to address it in the draft. There's still some good players out there, but you're talking about like other moves needing to be made in order to even try to go out and sign somebody. So it's like an extra dimension of difficulty that's added to that. So I just think that if there's a player like Newsome or Farley, or if they want to trade up into the middle of the first round and try to get somebody like J.C. Horner or Patrick Surtain Jr., I think those are the players that you can immediately look at and say you are going to play a huge role on this team right away. But outside of those 4, I don't know if there's anybody there at 28 who I really feel is somebody that you can just, with complete confidence, say go out there and play.
Yeah, and just because we're talking about the draft right now doesn't mean the salary cap situation is going away. So when they want to make some, moves in, as free agency continues, they're still broke. So like Luke said, you're still going to have to shuffle if that's the way you want to go about this. So nothing is done by any means. It's just a matter of how they're going to address the glaring problem that they have.
So just someone posted in the comments just to make me check Twitter, but I think they're lying to me. Unless there was a trade that is not showing up on my timeline.
I don't see anything yet, but it's always a fluid situation with the Saints.
Right.
Maybe somebody got fooled by Rap Shield or
mute all of those people when they come across your timeline. Mute and or block them.
My favorite is Rap Sheep, because I feel like it is a very appropriate name for what they're trying to get people to do. Anyway, but yeah, I think that one of the reasons that I kind of forced myself to go outside the box and pick other players at that position is because I did want to point out in our mock drafts, like, it's a very deep draft at cornerback, regardless of whether they get one at 28. I think Tyson Campbell was a guy who intrigued me as a potential second-round option. And, all the noise has been around the Saints moving into the top 10. But I think it's far more likely, whether they're trying to move into the top 10 or not, that doesn't mean it will happen. That's the thing that everyone seems to forget is you need two to tango there. And there's no guarantee there the offer is there for either side. But a move in the second round feels like it would be a lot more manageable if they take the best player available at 28 and then they ID the guy they want and find a way to go get him in the early to mid-second round. And a guy like Tyson Campbell jumped out to me as a very reasonable target in terms of the type of player the Saints like to go after. Eric Stokes is another player that would make sense. Two guys out of Georgia, a very good school for cornerbacks. Is there anyone who you would identify as, if they didn't, as a target in the second round, if they decided to go after them?
I really like Asante Samuel. I think he's a little bit smaller than the Saints usually go for. They have like their prototype size for positions, but if the skills are right, like you can kind of look past that a little bit. I think he's about the same size as Janoris Jenkins is. So yeah, I don't know if I would like him at 28, just because I think there is a little bit more risk involved there when you're talking about a player who you might have a flaw according to your system that you use. But I think if they aren't able to get a corner with their first round pick and they like Samuel, I think he'd be like a good player to try to move up into the 45 range. Maybe high 40s, low 40s rather. To go target. I think I like him better than the two Georgia corners, and I think there's guys in the mid rounds who I think could really help out too. I really like this Robert Rochelle player out of Central Arkansas, who might not have been playing at a place like Central Arkansas if not for the fact that he had like a torn ACL his senior year of high school, and he had it just put up some ridiculous numbers at a small school, which is what you want to see. What a player like Adam Troutman did, and he came in and was a very good NFL player as a rookie. So, I don't think they have to go corner number one, but they do have to address it, and they do have to address it, I think, fairly early to give themselves their best chance to get a guy who can play there.
Yeah, I like Samuel too.
He's got a great name. I love the name.
Yeah, it's very unique. I'm sure my iPhone would love that before I would add it into my dictionary like I do with every player's name so I don't mess it up. But one player I like at the back of the second, if they choose to stay there, be a linebacker in Jabril Cox. I know the Saints don't draft LSU players. I know. But I don't know. He, like we've talked about, he balled out at the small school level at North Dakota State. And he proved his worth this past season, playing for LSU. Now, LSU's defense left a lot to be desired this past season, but he was consistently a bright spot. And I think that he would be dangerous lining up next to Demario Davis. So that's one that I would like, but I know the Saints don't draft LSU players. So,
well, as you pointed out to me the other day when I said that this is Will Clapp erasure. He deserves some LSU credit. He was a 7th round pick. But no, I like Jabril Cox a lot. I like him and Jacoby Stevens in terms of what the Saints, how the Saints have kind of adapted at, that kind of hybrid linebacker safety role the last few years with a CD Deuce. And you see the importance that is placed on his role throughout, week to week. And I think adding depth behind him with, along with PJ Williams would be a good thing. And Jabril, I was incredibly impressed with Jabril in, seeing him in interviews and seeing how he, became a leader on a team that he joined for one season during COVID, and this team struggled mightily. And it's like, I think it says a lot about a guy that you can just walk in the room and instantly be a team leader on defense. Like, he's the guy who sat down for interviews. I think that's very telling. And I think high character guys are important to identify in the mid rounds, because you're not going to get the, mind-blowing talent that gets you to be a first rounder. But I think that can be a differentiator in the mid rounds. Okay, I think that's all I had. Was there anything y'all wanted to dive into we don't have Rod here to go over like the history of every Saints round by round, but I think there's some other.
No, but if y'all haven't read that yet, you really should. It'll take up a considerable chunk of your time today if you're looking to kill some time. But he did a really great job with it. I don't know. It's 54 drafts is a lot to go through, but he did a really good job putting that together.
In fact, I would recommend that anybody who's watching this should just, rather than hear us talk anymore, just go to NOLA.com and read a lot of the stuff we put up there, because it's a lot. It's a lot. We covered some of it in this, but not all of it, and you'll have to go.
There is a lot. And if you only have time to read one of the round by round columns, make it the third round, because every time I go through that list of players, it just kind of blows my mind how many, not just good players, like all pro players they've found in the third round over the years. Obviously, Alvin Kamara is up there on that list, but I don't think he's even number one. So that
don't spoil it. Make them read it.
Right. Alvin Kamara is on the list. I don't think that's all that much of a spoiler. But okay, and so we can get into that a little bit. We have a big splash page with a tracker file. If you want to go check it out, it's NOLA.com/sports/Saints. I put a lot of work into being able to say the slashes in that without a lisp, and I've gotten better. So you can go through that. It's got all the preview information. It's got links to all these stories we talked about. There's a lot of really good stuff in there. And as the draft goes on, it'll be updated with the picks and an interactive map to kind of get an idea of where each pick is coming from. We'll see if those draft slots have to change, but who knows? Right now, they are sitting pat. So maybe we have another few minutes of peace before the sky starts to fall down. But that's all from me. Thanks a lot, Luke, Amy, Oscar, for chiming in. Make sure to follow us over on NOLA.com. You can follow Amy on Twitter at Amy_just. You can follow Luke by Luke Johnson. You can follow me at Jeff_Nowak. And we'll keep it coming throughout the day. Thanks for everyone who watched, everyone who chimed in a comment, question, and let's see what happens. Bye. I have a video.